And here is part two of my interview from just a few hours earlier with former President Donald Trump. Let me ask you, are you following at all the Hunter Biden trial?
I am.
Okay. Let me ask you about two aspects of it. There's the legal aspect of it.
No.
Okay. Case seems pretty overwhelming on the gun charge in this case, in my opinion. He does not quite have this hostile venue in Delaware as you had.
No, he's got a very friendly venue. I had the most hostile venue you could have. We asked for a venue change, and we asked for a judge change.
Yeah, none of which
and
happened.
They wouldn't do it.
Okay. So, however, there's another aspect of it. And it's something that if you look at, like, for example, the fentanyl flowing into this country that is killing our children in massive numbers, and opioids killing our children in massive numbers. There is this issue that is very real, and I guarantee you there's not a person that's watching this show that doesn't know somebody, family member, friend, neighbor, that hasn't had to deal with addiction. You've had to deal with it in your life. You don't drink.
No.
Never have.
No. Never had a drink.
No.
I had a brother who suffered tremendously from alcoholism and alcohol. And it was a terrible thing to watch. He was an incredible guy with the best personality. He was the best looking person you've ever seen. Everything was perfect, but he had an addiction. And so I understand addiction because I was very close. He was very close to me. He was an incredible guy. But he suffered and I've had many friends, but my brother suffered tremendously from this addiction. In fact, he was older than me, and he'd go out and say, never drink, never, ever drink. Now, in those days, drugs were not prevalent, you didn't have that. But he'd say, never, ever drink. He knew exactly what he was saying. I used to say, what does he always say? But I never had a drink. I'm not bragging about it. I know one thing about addiction, because a lot of people say, what do you tell children? I say, if you don't have a drink, you're never going to have a problem. If you do have a drink, you have a good chance that you'll be addicted. Or drugs, because now drugs are probably equal to or greater. I mean, what's so bad? And they're dying from a drug the size of a pinhead. A little bit of fentanyl, literally what could fit on the end of a pin, can kill 10 people. It's crazy. And so dangerous out there. And so many are dying where they think they're getting something and going to have a little fun on a Friday night, and all of a sudden they're dead because of the power of what's happening. And the sad thing is that I had an agreement with President Xi of China. I said, listen, you're killing our people. It's going through Mexico, and Mexico is paying a big price also from me. It's going through Mexico, coming through. Most of it is 95% coming through the southern border. I built 571 miles of wall. And I had the Mexican army protecting us. I said, you're either going to protect us or I'm going to charge you big tariffs. And got along very well with the president of Mexico. They gave us tremendous protection during the time. We had the best level of numbers. Nobody's ever had numbers like the best we've ever had in terms of illegal immigration. In fact, my last week in office, we had less people coming into our country than at any time before. But importantly, we also had drugs were down 19%, 20%, and that's not enough. And by the way, you'll never really solve the drug problem unless you do what other countries do. So and that's the death penalty for drug dealers. But if you have a drug dealer on average will kill during that person's life 500 people. Unless you have a death penalty, unless there's something that right now they don't even get charged with anything. If you don't institute the death penalty for drug dealers, you'll never solve that problem. You'll get it down to a number that, like I got it down, actually at one point it was 22% down. That was a good thing, but you'll never solve the problem. We set up committees, we set up all of this. The cartels are run by very smart, very vicious people. They're pouring drugs into our country. Now, the number coming in now compared to 4 years ago is 12 times higher, drugs. So it's not only people, it's not only human trafficking, it's drugs. The drugs are pouring into our country totally unchecked.
Back to Hunter. So you have sympathy for addiction, okay? I think most Americans do, okay? That's not what the trial's about. And I think there are bigger issues involving the Biden family. We touched on it earlier, and that is, okay, how does somebody with no experience get paid millions of dollars, goes on Good Morning America, no experience, oil, energy, gas, Ukraine, millions of dollars. Then, of course, Vice President at the time, Joe Biden, leverages $1 billion tax dollars to get a prosecutor investigating the company he's in business with, his son's in business with, fired within 6 hours using $1 billion of our dollars. There are other
And you have a statute of limitations.
There are real legal issues.
Excuse me. The really big stuff, and their trial is, look, I feel very badly for them in terms of the addiction part of what they have right now, because I understand the addiction world, and I've also, not only a brother, I've lost a lot of friends to addiction, drugs, alcohol, and there are other addictions also, frankly. It would be nice if people would do certain things and live certain ways, but you're not able to, they're just not able to break it. I've had friends that are so strong. My brother was a strong person. I've had friends that were so strong, so powerful, they couldn't stay away from a glass of alcohol. They couldn't stay away from a drug. They had to have a drug. But you know the way that you solve the problem? Don't have them. If you don't have a taste for alcohol, I remember when I was going to school, college, I had a friend, he hated the taste of scotch, hated it. It was like, but he wanted to develop it because socially he thought it was a good thing. You know, I'd sit down with the bankers and, you know, all the Wharton School of Finance, they want to have dinners with bankers, right? That's their big thing. And he developed a taste for scotch. And by the time he finished, he ended up being a very bad alcoholic. I mean, 20, 25 years later, he ended up being an alcoholic and he couldn't stay away. I say the way you stay away, just don't drink. Just don't have it. If you don't have drugs, if you don't experience early on, you're not going to have a need for it. You're not going to have an addiction. If you don't drink alcohol, you're not going to have an addiction. You're not going to have this insatiable urge to have a drink. And I say that to people with your children. They ask me, what do you think of children? What do you tell them? I say, no drugs, no alcohol. I also say no cigarettes. Don't have the cigarettes. Don't have cigarettes. Don't have them. I have friends that can't stop smoking. If they never had a cigarette before, they'd have no problem. When I look at a friend that can't stop smoking, I don't understand why it's hard to stop. You know, the smoke all over the place. The fact is, if you never had a cigarette, I never had a cigarette. I have no urge to smoke. But if you are, you get addicted. It has something, and you just can't stop.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.